Good morning. I will be addressing the following question today. Why are Al Capone and Babe Ruth icons from the 1920s? Al Capone, a gangster, and Babe Ruth, a baseball player, hardly seem like worthy role models for the United States during this time, so it'll be interesting to break down just why we still remember and appreciate Capone and Ruth today. In this presentation, I will try to show how Babe Ruth and Al Capone became famous icons of the 20s, not solely because of their role in society, but rather their humble rags to riches story, thereby embodying the American dream, their vibrant lifestyles, and their flagrant disregard for prohibition. Babe Ruth's baseball career spanned from 1914 to 1935. Al Capone was a gangster in Chicago from 1920 to 1932. During this period in American history, there was World War I from 1914 to 1918, the Roaring Twenties and Prohibition, and after 1929, the Great Depression. The Roaring Twenties was a time in America where many Americans embraced new, exuberant styles of dancing, dressing, and popular culture. It coincided with the introduction of the Jazz Age and flappers, where women flaunted their bodies for the first time, and many Americans disobeyed traditional morals and purposefully disregarded prohibition. Capone's rise to fame coincided with the resentment for the Prohibition era. Ruth was one of the first sports stars of America, changing the game of baseball into a slugfest and thus energizing the fans of the national pastime. To understand why these two are considered immortal icons, we need to see the entirety of their lives and what it meant to millions of Americans searching for the next role model. Babe Ruth today represents, without question, the best baseball player to ever play the game. He ended the dead ball era of baseball, where pitching was dominant and games were low scoring, by launching home run after home run. He set many records, 60 homers in a season and 714 in total, all during a time where more than 15 home runs was considered phenomenal. Babe Ruth dominated the game of baseball in all facets of the game for more than 20 years. Starting off as a pitcher, he won 3 World Series with Boston, and after being traded to the Yankees for cash considerations, and thus starting the curse of the Bambino, he then became a feared power hitter. Al Capone is the most notorious gangster in American history. He became famous in Chicago for supplying illegal alcohol during Prohibition. He led his multi-million-dollar Chicago crime organization for 7 years, from 1925 to 1932, before he was jailed for tax evasion. A ruthless killer leading a very public life, Capone was also one of the first inmates at Alcatraz. George Herman Ruth grew up without much parental guidance, as his parents were poor and worked long hours. As a troublesome 7-year-old, he was sent to St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys, which provided a strict learning environment. After learning to play baseball at St. Mary's, at age 19, Ruth's tireless efforts to hone his baseball skills paid off as he was recruited by the Baltimore Orioles. Babe Ruth is known for his reckless life outside of baseball. He always got into trouble for his temper, as well as staying out too late, cursing, eating too much, and drinking too much alcohol, and even womanizing. He was frequently documented for being out of shape during the baseball season, and was once hospitalized after binge eating hot dogs, an event dubbed the bellyache heard round the world. Despite the obvious flaws in his lavish lifestyle, Babe Ruth was also known for his generosity, tenderness, and love for children. He is remembered to have stayed after every game signing autographs for hours on end. An underlying reason in his quest to hit as many home runs as possible is that he was always trying to please the crowd. After the Black Sox scandal of the 1919 World Series, baseball was painted in a bad light. It was Babe Ruth who helped regain the trust of America, simultaneously ending the dead ball era and making baseball America's favorite pastime. He is etched into baseball folklore forever, with tales like the curse of the Bambino and calling his famous home run. Al Capone was born in New York City to recently immigrated Italians in 1899. He was poor and grew into gang life almost immediately, dropping out of school at age 14. At 19, he was married and had a son. At 20, he moved to Chicago to be gang leader Johnny Torrio's right-hand man, and at 26, he had inherited the entire Chicago gang operation from Torrio. Despite being a thug icon, Al Capone was actually viewed by many as a Robin Hood character because he was generous, donating to charity and starting soup kitchens during the Depression. However, he was also a cold-hearted killer when it came to crime operations, and he eventually fell out of public favor after orchestrating the brutal St. Valentine's Day massacre. Al Capone was the main icon of a rise in crime and gangsters during the 20s. He owed much of his fame to the Prohibition era, as he earned $60 million annually from alcohol sale. He became the face of crime operations across the states then, as the target of President Hoover's crackdown on crime, and now, as he is revered as the ultimate gangster. Babe Ruth is still remembered today because of his extraordinary combination of performance and personality. It also helped that his heyday came at the height of the Roaring Twenties in the busy and growing New York City. His legendary status continued during the Great Depression as he represented a small beacon of hope to the many Americans tuning in on Yankee games on the radio. Al Capone may not have held influence for as long as Babe Ruth did, but he blended an altruistic public life with a sketchy job. His staggering yearly income of over $1 million, all from his illegal Chicago crime operation, awed and inspired many Americans. His legacy lives on today for his medley of cold and kind-heartedness. So why did Babe Ruth and Al Capone achieve infamy during the Roaring Twenties? Most of all, they embodied the 20s ideals. Reckless and eccentric, these men benefited from the easygoing, liberal United States, where noble crimes like operating speakeasies were actually encouraged, as Americans were able to find models in new places and professions. Babe Ruth and Al Capone stood for the Roaring Twenties. They were both men who overcame poor and troubled childhoods to become the best in the business at their profession. They combined their profession with their magnanimous personality into an eccentric public figure that captured the principles of the reforming twenties. They were part of an inaugural figure in America, icons not from politics but from sports and gangs. They operated out of major cities and earned millions of dollars, and thus were thrust into the media limelight with their very public lives. Al Capone and Babe Ruth were controversial icons of the 20s that will be commemorated for becoming the premier leader in their given profession, giving hope to millions of Americans in their own pursuits at the very best time.